Like what you see here? Then be sure to subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8, a channel devoted to the history of college football. New videos drop twice a week. Click the card in the upper right corner or the link in the description to subscribe now. And now, on with our feature presentation.
Alright, here's a trivia question for you to start things off and get the ball rolling. Who was the first player in the history of the Milwaukee Brewers to ever start at the MLB All-Star Game? Who was the first player that the Brewers ever had that was in the lineup right away, and was named the best player at his position by the fans? While you might have some guesses, like Hank Aaron, or Cecil Cooper, or Raleigh Fingers, as it turns out, the correct answer is the man that you've been watching this whole time, Don Money. In 1978, Money made history in a way that no other Brewer before him had. Ever since the team's creation in 1970, or 1969 if we count their one season as the Seattle Pilots, while they had players named to the All-Star Game, they never had a starter. That is, not until Don Money. Because of the 1978 MLB All-Star Game, after making it to 3 of the last 4 editions of the game as a backup, Money got the starting nod, starting the game for the American League at second base. However, this All-Star selection did not come without its fair share of controversy. Because now, I want you to imagine this bizarre scenario. Imagine that Aaron Judge started this upcoming All-Star Game representing the New York Yankees. However, he was listed as the starting shortstop. Wait a sec, you might be thinking to yourself. That's odd, isn't it? I mean, Judge is a great player, don't get me wrong, but he's not a shortstop. He's an outfielder. Why did he earn the starting nod over someone else who actually plays the position? A situation like that would be bizarre, and would send every baseball fan into a frenzy. However, that's sort of what happened here with Don Money at the 1978 MLB All-Star Game. Because of course, the first time the Brewers send someone to the All-Star Game, it causes a great deal of drama. Because this is the story behind Don Money and the craziest All-Star controversy in the more than half-century-long history of the Milwaukee Brewers franchise. Before I talk about the controversy itself, as well as the reaction to it, we need some context to understand just how good Don Money was, and how well he was playing. After years of being in the cellar of the American League, finishing every season with a losing record, the 1978 season was really the first time that the Brewers were actually good, and where people were paying attention to them. Again, this was a team that was averaging just 67 wins a season over their last 3 years. But in 1978, not only were they well on pace to smash that and play good baseball, but they were in a position to potentially win the AL East and make it to the playoffs for the first time ever. By the All-Star break, this was a team sitting at 48-35, having the second best record in the American League and the 5th best record of any team in Major League Baseball. And while there were many reasons for the success of the Brewers during the first half of the 1978 season, one of the big ones was the play of the man that you've been watching this whole time, Don Money. Now, Money was a great player for a very long period of time. He joined Milwaukee in 1973 after spending 5 seasons with the Philadelphia Phillies over in the National League, and made it to 3 All-Star games before, making it with Milwaukee in 1974, 1976, and 1977. In fact, he was coming off of the career best year in 1977, when he had a career-high 25 home runs and 83 RBI. However, in 1978, he was showing no signs of slowing down, as his great play over the first half was an instrumental part in Milwaukee being one of the best teams in the American League, and one of the best teams in baseball for that matter. Through the break, he was hitting .266, right in line with his .267 average in 1976 when he made the All-Star Game, and had an on-base percentage of .346, right in line with his .348 percentage in 1977 when he made the All-Star Game. In other words, this season was business as usual for him, and because of his strong play, as well as because the Brewers were a feel-good story and were getting national recognition, Money was not just in line to make his 4th All-Star Game ever, but for the first time ever, start this game, as the fans voted him in. In fact, when it came to the voting for who should start at second base in the American League, it wasn't even close. Don Money was the only player with 2 million votes, with second place Willie Randolph of the New York Yankees getting somewhere in the ballpark of 1.5 million. There were some awfully close races for the All-Star Game that year and who should start in San Diego. The battle at catcher between Carlton Fisk of the Boston Red Sox and Jim Sundberg of the Texas Rangers was decided by just under 35,000 votes, and Reggie Jackson of the New York Yankees got the nod to start in the outfield by just over 43,000 votes. But the balloting for second base? Not even close. It was a runaway. Don Money was going to start the All-Star Game. However, there was just one small problem. Money was not a second baseman. While Money was obviously a really good player who had the stats and whatnot to start the game, you could not possibly say that he was a second baseman. He started 106 games for the Brewers at second base in 1977, as that was his primary position the previous year. But in 1978, not so much. Through Milwaukee's first 83 games, which was the first half of the season, Money was used at second base in 10 of them. That's it. For just 12% of the season, Milwaukee's starting second baseman was Don Money. The last time Money played second base was a full month before the All-Star Game, when he played second base on June 9th in a 3-2 win over the Toronto Blue Jays. After that, he played nothing but first base, playing his previous 26 games at first. The Brewers liked putting him at designated hitter and at third base and at first base, but very rarely did they put him at second, only putting him there twice from April 24th until the All-Star break. And when Major League Baseball put Money on the ballot, they looked at his 1977 production in the field when he was a second baseman, and just assumed that it would carry over into 1978. Meanwhile, it did not at all. Not in the slightest bit. Calling Don Money a second baseman in 1978 was like calling Miami Dolphins player Ronnie Brown a quarterback. Sure, he lined up at quarterback a few times in the Wildcat formation, but no one would consider him to be a quarterback in the slightest bit. And this caused a fair amount of outrage, especially since when the players voted, of the 196 votes received from the American League, a grand total of one player would have voted for Money to start the game at second base, with a consensus among the players seeming to be Frank White of the Kansas City Royals. And one particular player who was furious about this was on the Royals, with that player being none other than starting third baseman George Brett, who believed that Don Money, his American League teammate in San Diego, had no business whatsoever starting this game and being in the game. It was so tense that Brett and Money even got into an argument, especially once Brett found out that his locker was right next to Money's. As Brett said, there had been one or two farces in the past. It's a farce this year that Don Money is making it. He hadn't played second base all year. Do you think it is fair to Frank White, who played second base all year and is having a hell of a year? And when Money heard those comments, oh man, he popped off. While fully acknowledging that the system was wrong, and agreeing with Brett that the system was more about fans wanting to see certain players versus fans voting on the players that actually deserved it, and while acknowledging himself that he probably should not have made it at second base, he felt that Brett's comments were incredibly disrespectful, and were putting down everything that Money worked so hard for, not just this season, but for the franchise. As Money said, "I have no control over the vote. He doesn't either. What am I supposed to say? I don't want to go?" Brett is popping off because he is disturbed that Frank White didn't get it. Who is he to pop off? I don't think it is his place to do it. The people voted. What are you supposed to do? I don't like what he said. Now, Brett backtracked a little bit, implying that his comments were taken out of context, and that he had meant that Money shouldn't be the starting second baseman since he hadn't played the position, but not that he shouldn't be in the All-Star Game. He deserves to be there. But in Money's eyes, what Brett did was still insanely disrespectful, especially since the All-Star Game should be a friendly, almost celebratory environment, and Brett was turning it into something about a player not deserving their starting spot. As Money said, I said to him, "Why are you mad at me? It wasn't my fault I got named to a position I haven't played this year. I'm proud that the fans picked me, because it makes me the first Brewer ever to start an All-Star Game." And it's true. Money didn't ask for this. He didn't ask for any of this. He is in a no-win situation. Decide to sit out the game, and you're disrespecting the fans who voted you there and disrespecting the Brewers, since this is the first time ever that they've had a starter, and that's a big deal. Decide to play, and you make everyone upset by being an unqualified and unworthy starting second baseman, seeing as you don't play the position. And the drama got so heated and so noteworthy that Howard Cosell himself, during the broadcast, talked about what a farce the selection process was. Take a listen.
They really have, and this young man is an integral part of that story. But most importantly, he's played all but 12 games at first base this year. Takes a strike. Yet under the voting system, he's elected the All-Star second baseman, which raises some eyebrows.
That's when you know. And while the Brewers would obviously have many more All-Stars and starters down the line, this was the last one for Don Money. His numbers dipped considerably after 1978, as he never made it to another All-Star Game again, ending his career in Milwaukee after the 1983 season with those 4 appearances and 1 start. But to say that the 1 start was highly controversial would be putting it lightly. Oh, and for what it's worth, the first series after the All-Star break was in Milwaukee, between, of course, the Brewers and the Royals. You couldn't script it any better. Unsurprisingly, Brett got loudly booed by the Milwaukee faithful, which infuriated him and led Money to say, "I know why the fans were booing Brett tonight. I read the papers too." Don Money is an absolutely legendary Brewer. He's in the team's Walk of Fame and their Wall of Honor for a reason. But despite all the things he did do during his over decade-long tenure with the team, perhaps he's best remembered for what he didn't do. And that was play second base in the year that he was named the All-Star starter at second base. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.